Hello folks, my name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? My peoples, where you at? A lot of people that I'm talking to out in real life and on the internet are still kind of in shock over the recent election loss and the re-election of Donald Trump. People are worried, and they have a right to be worried. And you kind of have to make some room for people a little bit here. A lot of people are very worried for very good reasons. They're afraid of what's going to happen. They think that this is the end of the country, the end of America, the end of democracy, and that with Trump at the helm, life is going to get very bad for them, up to and including them being actively persecuted. Yeah, it could get pretty bad, but I think we all need to kind of take a step back and take a look at what is actually most likely going to happen. I don't want to call this a prediction video, because it's not a prediction. This is just more of what is the most likely thing, I would say. Because who knows what's actually really going to happen? If I had a crystal ball, I'd be rich. But I think we should all just kind of take a step back, though, and not panic. Don't freak out, because it's not the end of the country. It's not the end of the world. It's just going to be a very rough next 4 years. And I don't want to sugarcoat that for anybody. The next Trump administration is going to be a shit show. It's going to be a shit show that's going to suck, and lots of people are going to get hurt. Let's just kind of say that off right at the beginning there. It's going to be very bad for lots of people, but will it be the absolute end of America? Will the United States collapse and our country just dissolve like something that happened to the Soviet Union or something like that? I don't think we really need to worry about that happening. So one thing that people are really worried about that I'm hearing is Trump's threat to deport 20 million people who are here illegally, which is impossible. That's not something that's going to happen. There's no way that he can deport 20 million people, not with ICE the way it currently is. You would need 1 million ICE agents in order to do that, and it's just not something that's possible. Even if they run all three branches of government, that would cost billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars to actually accomplish. It would also involve them changing the actual immigration law, which is something that is not going to happen either. See, here's the thing, right? Even if they do get both houses of Congress, that doesn't mean the Democrats are 100% powerless. They can do all of the obstructing type actions that the Republicans are real famous for doing, like filibustering everything. Unless the Republicans remove the filibuster for all legislation, which is very unlikely to happen, then I don't see how they can ram through immigration reform to the effect where they can just throw people on train cars and dump them in Mexico, which is what it would take in order to deport 20 million people in 4 years. That's 5 million people a year, and it's just not possible. See, currently, everybody who is accused of being here illegally has to go through the system. They all get a court date. They all get a chance to defend themselves, because it could be that maybe they are here legally. So you can't just throw someone on a bus and drop them off in Tijuana. That's just not how it actually works. And any conservative MAGA type guy who thinks that's what's going to happen is solely mistaken. And I don't see that legislation changing anytime soon. So what will actually happen, what is most likely going to happen, is that they're going to do the same kind of tactics that they did during the first Trump administration. Things like reopening the immigrant camps. You guys remember that? See, currently what they do now is that when someone comes over, they get processed and then they get released because they have to come back for their court date. And surprisingly, a vast majority of people who come here illegally actually do come back for their court dates. Why? Because they actually want to stay in the country and work legally. And so what do? Well, you can't hold them all in prison, because being an undocumented person is actually not a crime. It's not actually a crime that you go to prison for. So they usually release them on their own reconnaissance. And then they go and they stay with relatives and stuff like that. And what the Trump people are most likely going to do is that they'll just not release them. They'll reopen the camps that they had. I mean, you guys all remember that, right? You guys remember the immigrant camps that Trump had where he was separating children from their families and stuff like that. And that was like essentially a crime against humanity. That's coming back. That's what'll happen. So get ready for children to be thrown in cages. Get ready to be very angry over families being split up. You know, some of the children from that first go around, I think it was somewhere around like 500 children or something, like were never reunited with their families. Like they just went into the foster care system because they couldn't track down their actual families. Get ready for that to happen again. Get ready for people who are detained in these camps to be abused physically and sexually. There were lots of reports of rapes coming out of these camps. There were lots of reports of trans people, for example, getting the shit beat out of them. Stuff like that. Get ready for all of this kind of thing because Donald Trump is about to reenact the worst of his policies when it comes to immigration. Another thing that they're most likely going to do is go after people who have been residents in the United States for years and years who are not actually citizens. People that have been living here with green cards, that kind of thing. People who have families here, who have jobs, who have started businesses even, who are contributing to society and contributing to our tax base. The Trump people will start going after them. We know this because that's what they did during the first Trump administration. They would deport people who had been in the country for 40 years. I remember reading a story about a girl who was graduating from high school, and she was like valedictorian. And on the day of her graduation, like she gave a graduation speech, and ICE agents were there waiting for her at her graduation, and she got deported. People like the Dreamers, I think DACA is what it is, you know, the deferred action, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The Dreamers, the people who have come here when they were small children, who have never actually lived in their country of origin, and for all intents and purposes are Americans. And those are people who are going to get deported. And it's going to piss a lot of people off. It's going to piss off a lot of people in these communities. A lot of the Hispanics and Latinos out there who voted for Trump are going to regret it. They're going to see this open racism because remember, folks, you don't see people from Northern Europe, for example, who overstay a visa. Those people aren't getting thrown into camps. You know, somebody from Sweden or Norway who comes over here and stays too long on their student visa or something like that. They're not the ones who are going to be thrown into a camp with their children taken away from them. No, it's only happening to people who come from south of the border. Why? Because of racism. That's why. But here's the thing, right? Lots of these people voted for Donald Trump. The people who are American citizens or their friends and family, the people who are going to be affected by this, they voted for Donald Trump. Donald Trump increased his support among the Hispanic and Latino communities by almost 50% this last election. Well, you're going to reap what you sow, people. So better hope that you don't have any friends or family who are going to be affected by this because, you know, them leopards, they like eating people's faces. The other thing that'll probably happen is that he's going to start up his stupid fucking wall again. And it'll become a big thing. You know, the stupid fucking wall, he's going to have to get, like, money for the stupid fucking wall. Like, you remember that time that he illegally stole money from the Department of Defense in order to build a stupid fucking wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for? Remember that? Well, get ready for more bullshit like that, too. But whatever. That'll be the least of our fucking problems, if you ask me, the stupid fucking wall. If that's the only thing that he wastes his time on as president, I think we'll be getting off light. Speaking of illegal things, all of the court cases against Donald Trump are going to be dropped. He's going to get away with it. All 91 charges, he'll get away with all of them. It is a standing policy that the Department of Justice does not prosecute a sitting president. By the time Trump is out of office, the statute of limitations for the majority of the crimes that he committed, and he did commit them, he's guilty, he fucking did it, but he's going to get away with it scot-free because he's the president. And being the president of the United States is a get-out-of-jail-free card. Donald Trump has defeated the Department of Justice. That's just what happened. The voters spoke. The voters said, hey, here comes a guy that is a convicted felon who tried to take over the country in a coup, who walked home with illegal documents that put the defense of this nation at risk, and they liked it. They wanted more of that. We live in a democracy, so this is what the people are going to get what they want. He's getting away with all of it. I told you folks, I've said this many times in videos over the last 3 years or so, that Donald Trump was not going to prison. I told you he was not going to go to prison. I even thought that even if he lost the election, he still wouldn't go to prison. But now it's official. He's gotten away with it. I hope it feels good. I hope all of you MAGA people out there can pat yourselves on the back knowing that you allowed this man to just basically run ramshot over the laws in this country. That now there are two Americas here, and I hope you understand that you created this, folks. My Republican friends out there, you guys created this, because I know conservatives watch my channel. You do, because I'm always getting messages telling me to fuck off from you people. So I know that you're fucking watching, and I hope it feels good. I hope it feels good to know that because of you, if you're rich in the United States, you can get away with anything you fucking want. And we just put a big old sign up saying, here you go, folks. Rich people, listen well, the law does not apply to you. That's what you just did. And now, so you might be asking, well, what about the New York case, like the Stormy Daniels case, right? Because he's already been convicted for that. He was supposed to be sentenced. And the judge, Merchan, chickened out like a fucking wimp and didn't want to sentence Trump before the election because he didn't want to be like, oh, well, I'm going to be influencing the election if I sentence Trump. Like a fucking moron. What's going to happen with that? Even though he's already been convicted, this is what's going to happen. The charges will be dropped somehow. He'll get some other judge that he appointed or whatever. Or maybe it'll even go to the Supreme Court. Some way, somehow, he's going to put institutional pressure that's going to overturn this conviction, and he's not going to serve 1 day in prison for shit that he was already been convicted of doing. They've already convinced a jury of his peers that he's guilty. He did it. The evidence shows that he fucking did it. He's going to get away with it. These are the consequences of an election. We told you that it was going to happen. So any of you out there who were kind of hoping that Donald Trump would just go to prison and we wouldn't have to worry about him being president again, you lost. I don't know why you thought that was an effective strategy. He's not going to prison. No one in this country who is in a position of power, like the president or very powerful CEOs or politicians, they never get held accountable for stuff like this. Why would we start holding Donald Trump accountable for it? He's a president, and now the Supreme Court has basically said that he's immune. So it's going to be even worse now that he's the president now, because he's emboldened. He knows that he can't be held accountable for anything as long as he calls it an official act. So every illegal fucking thing he does, he's just going to call it an official act, and he's going to get away with it scot-fucking-free. Even if he does, in 4 years, try to illegally stop the next election or whatever and stay on for a third term, as long as he does it through an official act or whatever, the Supreme Court says that it's absolutely fucking fine. I hope you guys understand that. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No. No, I think in 4 years, he's going to fuck this country up so bad. I think that the country is going to be going to hell in a handbasket by the end of 4 years. And the reason why I think this is because that's what happened during his first term. I don't know if you guys remember 2020, but in 2020, shit was falling apart. We had riots in the street over BLM. We had a global fucking pandemic where 1 million people died. In no small part thanks to Donald Trump's reaction to that pandemic. If he would have been smart about it, he could have stopped those people from dying. But no, he wasn't smart about it. He was telling people to fucking rub horse paste under their armpits and to shine fucking ultraviolet lights and shit up their ass. Like, that's what he was fucking doing, all right? He was a goddamn idiot. He was like undermining his own Surgeon General, all right? His own Surgeon General had to like walk on eggshells around him in order to not contradict Trump so that he wouldn't get fired. Like, that's how bad Donald Trump handled the goddamn pandemic, all right? Something like that is most likely going to happen again. I don't know if there'll be another pandemic. If I had to guess, it would probably be an economic downturn. Hopefully it won't be an economic downturn that's so bad, like 2008 or 2020, where we had millions and millions of people out of work, but there will most likely be an economic downturn because of Donald Trump's tariff policy. Now, getting into the tariff thing, that's going to be a problem because Donald Trump can't enact tariffs without Congress, and that was the law ever since the 1960s. It comes from Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, and I actually looked that up. Right? It's not like I had that memorized or anything. I looked it up. And what that means is that basically the president can enact certain tariffs, not blanket tariffs across everything. But he can enact certain tariffs as long as he can frame it as a threat to national security. So what does that actually mean? Well, this is a Cold War kind of law. And the idea was that, hey, we need, for example, steel. We need it in order to build tanks for an impending war. So they would say, okay, well, I'm going to put a tariff on steel because, we need to produce that domestically or something like that. That's what this law actually says. So the law doesn't say that he can put a 200% tariff on every single imported good that comes from China or anywhere else. That's just not a thing. I don't think we really have to worry about that. How's he going to argue that, say, for example, electronics or something? Right, like the import of electronics is a threat to national security. Like, I don't think that's a thing to really worry about. But he will be able to do it to some goods like steel. He'll be able to do it to things like exports, like soybeans, stuff like that. I mean, this is what he was able to do in 2018. So will it be across the board? No, but it will be a lot of different goods are going to go up. This is going to cause economic downturn because Donald Trump is too fucking stupid to understand that a tariff is a tax on the American people and on American corporations. So the corporations that import these things are not going to find domestic suppliers because there are no domestic suppliers for a lot of this stuff. For example, electronics. You can't make a PlayStation 5 in the United States. It's just there's no domestic suppliers that can actually do that, for example. A lot of the electronics and stuff like that, computer chips, that kind of thing. A lot of those things, there's just no domestic manufacturing for this at all. So the prices on that stuff is going to go up. The other thing is that, well, these are taxes that the companies are going to have to pay, so they're just going to pass that down to the consumer. So yes, shit is about to get more expensive. And if he tries to tax everything with these tariffs, then everything is going to become more expensive. But even if he just taxes things like raw materials, like steel and that kind of thing, then the goods that are manufactured here using those raw materials are about to go up as well. So it will reverberate through the economy and things will become more expensive. And we will see inflation. And that is what's going to happen, because that's what happens when you raise tariffs. And when you raise tariffs also, it has another effect that the country you're raising the tariffs on will also raise it's the same kind of tariffs on you, so that depresses your export market. And it's very bad overall for the economy. So get ready for the economy to take a hit. Now, will it result in a collapse? I don't think so. I think certain industries are about to get pretty fucking bad. I don't know. I mean, I can't read the future, so I can't tell you which companies are going to go out of business or whatever industry you work in. But you can assume certain things like, say, construction, for example, may slow. If he's putting a tariff on imported raw goods, things like steel, things like lumber, shit like that. If he's putting a tariff on these things, those industries are going to slow down. Things like new home building, things like construction of retail stores, shit like that. If he puts a tariff on things like car imports, for example, then get ready for cars to cost more. Get ready for less people to buy cars. And if you happen to work in a satellite industry, like I used to, around the auto industry, then get ready for a downturn there. It's going to suck. It's going to suck. And if you work in any of these industries that are going to be affected by his tariffs, then I recommend you polish up that resume. Chances are it's going to get rough. And I think people need to learn this lesson. People need to learn that when a politician says something, you should believe him. Now, do I think, though, however, that he'll be able to even do this? No. I think that he will put tariffs on certain industries, like I said, like imported steel, lumber, construction materials, things like soybeans, stuff like that. I think he'll put tariffs on those things, but I think overall his tariff threat is just bluster. Why is that? Because his billionaire friends are going to tell him not to do it. People like Elon Musk and all that, they're going to come to him and they're going to be like, don't do this, you're going to fuck up the economy. And then someone will convince him not to do it. I think really the tariff thing, for the most part, was just a campaign promise, and it was just bullshit. But I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully that is the case. Hopefully he doesn't fucking do that. But it's Donald Trump, so you can't, assume that he's going to act logically. I don't know. I think it's an empty campaign promise, but I guess we'll find out. So another one, of course, is 2025, Project 2025. Everybody's afraid of that. They're shitting their pants thinking that this is it. It's the fascist takeover of the United States. Well, there's a lot in Project 2025. And yeah, it's scary. Things like, for example, using an old outdated law called the Comstock Act in order to ban mifepristone, stuff like that. So another big thing, right, they're talking about is how he's going to use an executive order to reclassify career bureaucrats into positions that he can hire and fire, like political positions, right? And why is this a big deal? It's because a lot of these people have been working there in the government for their whole lives. They've made careers out of it. These are the experts that keep our regulatory agencies running. And people are afraid, like, oh, well, he's going to fire all of these guys and he's going to stack these agencies with lackeys. And yeah, that is something that most likely is going to happen. That's something that we can't really stop because this is a power that the president has. So what'll happen? Well, regulatory agencies like the FDA, for example, are just not going to do their jobs. That's what's going to happen. And you're gonna start seeing things like food recalls, E. coli in the lettuce and cabbage, that kind of thing. You're gonna start seeing shit like that because the FDA is gonna not be doing its job. Stuff like that. The FTC, they're gonna relax all of their policies and allow billionaires to get away with robbing us all blind. And then they will also suddenly remember that they have regulatory powers when it comes to people who stand up to Trump. So, like, he's threatened, for example, to remove the broadcast licenses of cable channels that criticize him, stuff like that. Now, is this actually going to happen? Well, yes and no. One thing to remember is that these rule changes can be challenged in courts. And I think that's where our best bet of defeating him in this avenue comes from. The opposition, the Democratic opposition, should just use the courts and gum up the works and keep it from being enacted. Because you got to remember, this is all stuff that's being done through executive order, so it can all be undone when Donald Trump leaves office. All we really need to do is slow it down. Keep all of his changes gummed up in the courts for 4 years until we can unelect his ass. Or even 2 years until we can get to the midterms and then capture one branch of Congress where we can actually start introducing legislation to curtail shit like this, right? This is essentially what the Republicans have been doing to the Democrats for decades, is that using the courts and using bureaucratic resistance and stuff like that in order to prevent their agenda from going forward. There's no reason why the Democrats can't do it back to the Republicans. And you may be saying, well, what about the Supreme Court? Well, the Supreme Court is on Trump's side, right? They're just going to side with him every single time. Well, first off, that doesn't mean that they will automatically side with him every single time. They may. I mean, they've kind of shown in the past that they're willing to do that. But it can take a long time for stuff to wind its way through the courts, and all you have to do is get one judge to put a stay on any given rule change saying, this rule change can't go into effect until we have our court date, and then just delay. And before you know it, 4 years have passed, and Donald Trump hasn't been able to actually enact the majority of his agenda. I think that's probably the most direct way, without, sans elections, that we can put the kibosh on some of this 2025 shit. But there is going to be some things that we won't be able to stop. And it's going to suck. The people are going to have to learn that this is what happens when you lose elections, when you're not in power. And I mean, that's the thing. There's a lot to Project 2025. But the other thing I want to kind of emphasize to people, right, is that Project 2025 is not a law. It's not like he becomes president and then the next day, all of the shit that's detailed in it suddenly gets enacted. It's a series of policy proposals. And it doesn't mean that they'll all be enacted exactly the way that the proposal says, or that even any of it will be enacted at all. It's just their guidelines, their proposals that the Heritage Foundation wants the next Republican president to enact. There are things that can be stopped in courts, like I said. There are things that we can put pressure on our politicians to stop. And this means going out and protesting and stuff like that too. So all of you leftists out there who don't like voting, now you get to go out in the street and hold a sign again. You know, that seems to be the way that you like to do shit. So there you go. Go out there and start protesting Project 2025. There's lots of ways that we can stop it through using all of these different avenues. So don't panic over it. But a lot of it is going to get enacted and it is going to be bad. But remember, please, that it's all temporary, because the majority of it is just changing the way that the regulatory agencies work. And he has to use executive orders to do all this. Well, as soon as he's out of office, all those executive orders can be reversed. So there's not going to be much in the way of permanent changes from Project 2025. So don't panic. Don't flip out. Yeah, it's going to suck for a couple of years. And people's lives are going to be changed. And people are going to be hurt. That's just what's going to happen because we lost the election. But that doesn't mean that you give up. That doesn't mean that you're powerless. There's lots of things we can do in order to stop the worst of it from happening. And that's what we need to concentrate on when it comes to Project 2025. Speaking of Congress, people are afraid of that too because it looks like the Republicans are going to have both houses of Congress. And yeah, that's bullshit. That's going to suck. But like I said before, we could just filibuster everything and pretty much grind Congress to a standstill. What we won't be able to do, however, is stop Donald Trump from getting another Supreme Court pick. And I think this is going to be the most long-lasting effect of this election, is that he's going to get one, maybe two more on that court. Possibly. At the very least, he'll be able to replace some of the old conservative judges, like Clarence Thomas, with younger conservative judges. Which means that it'll still be a 6-3 court for the next 40 years. Probably for the rest of my life, it's going to be a conservative Supreme Court now. I don't know, unless they all die in a plane crash or something, or unless, they all die of COVID, or unless they all have some kind of come to Jesus moment and switch sides. This is what we're going to have to live with for the rest of our lives. So those of you watching this who are in your 20s, in your teens and in your 20s, you might live to actually see another liberal court by the time you're in your 50s or 60s. I probably won't. So just get ready for that. And this is a consequence of not voting. This is what happens when you don't vote. When you don't vote, the opposition wins. When you don't participate, when you don't fight, you lose. And this is what losing looks like. So who knows what's going to happen there? I don't know. I hope at the very least that nothing happens to any of the liberal justices on that court. I hope none of them die of heart attacks or die in plane crashes or anything over the next 4 years. We can only hope. So yeah, this is a consequence, man. That's going to be bad shit, right? Bad things are going to happen in this country. There's going to be very shitty Supreme Court decisions for the next 40 years now. This is reality. We can't run away from it. So what can you do all about this, right? What can you do? Trump is about to embark us on a very, very shitty 4 years. That's going to suck really bad for a lot of people. It's going to really hurt people. What can you do about it? Well, first thing you can do is vote. And that's every election. Yeah, the vote for the president is over with, but there will still be statewide elections. There will still be things like special elections. There will still be local elections. You can get out there and organize and get rational people who will make good decisions elected in those elections. And that's what you should be doing. for every election. Vote in every goddamn election. If you're a person that doesn't vote, please learn that lesson. Let this really horrible fucking loss teach you that lesson at least. That you need to fucking be politically active. There's no more sitting on the sidelines here. And if you don't fucking go out there and make the change that you want, then the change you want will never fucking happen. So that's the first thing you do. Second thing you can do is, believe it or not, this is going to sound trite and ridiculous, write your congressman. And I know a lot of my leftist friends out there are going to laugh at that when they hear me say that. They're going to be like, what, are you fucking joking? No, write your congressman. I think most of them actually, if you go on their websites, they've got a thing where you can drop an email or something like that. Because, believe it or not, your congressman actually does read those letters. They have staff that's their entire job, is to sit there and go through correspondence from their constituents. Because they need to know what their constituents want, because the job of a congressman is to get reelected. And if they want to get reelected, they have to actually please the people in their districts. So write your congressman and tell them what you want. Tell your congressman you want them to do everything within their power to resist the MAGA agenda. You can also engage in direct actions now that the voting part is done with and we completely fucking blew it. The only thing that's left is direct actions. So go out there and protest and stuff like that. And be vocal. Be vocal on social media. Because believe it or not, your politicians actually do pay attention to social media as well. There's entire firms that all they do is they go through and they scrape YouTube and Facebook comments and tweets and stuff like that, and they compile it all together and present it to politicians in order to give them a measure on what people care about. I know this because I've worked for companies that do shit like this. This is a real thing. They actually do care what people think and what they say, and they cater their messages and their policies accordingly. Why do you think somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene is so fucking insane? Because the people in her district like it. That's what they want. She's getting correspondence from people in her district saying that she's great and she's awesome and everything she's doing is cool. And then she leans into it and she keeps getting reelected. Why do you think Ted Cruz keeps getting reelected? Ted Cruz is a national fucking joke. The guy's a moron. He's like on TV abandoning his people, running to Cancun when the fucking blizzards and shit show up. He just got reelected. Why? Because he's listening to his constituents. Because his constituents want him to be an asshole. They like it when they see him on TV triggering the libs or whatever. And they write to him and they tell him so. So write to your congressman and tell them what you want. Send them messages directly. Respond to them on Twitter. Do it on Facebook. Tell them what you want and they will do what you want because they want to get reelected. And I know that sounds stupid and trite and ridiculous and bullshit. Nobody believes it, but it's actually true. And the other thing is get active politically in your local area. Get active in your state politics. Learn about the people who are actually running your town and what they do. Learn about the policies out there that are being enacted with your tax dollars. Educate your friends who are not politically active. And maybe next time we'll actually win. See, the thing we got to remember about this election, folks, is that it was not a landslide. It looks like it is. It wasn't. Trump won by roughly the same margin that Biden won by in 2020. Right around the same amount, even though he got like 13 million votes less than Biden did in 2020. Right around those same margins, you know, about 100,000 votes here, 20,000 votes there in each state. It was actually much closer than people are being led to believe here. Trump actually got less votes in this election than he did in 2020. The difference is that Kamala Harris got way less votes than Joe Biden did. You know, she got like 13 million votes less or something ridiculous like that. So what does this mean? This means that it's not that the Republicans and the conservatives and the fascists are super powerful, because they're not. Their support is actually dwindling. The reason why we lost is because we are not motivated. So get motivated. If you want to see this change happen in this country, then you need to get motivated. And the next time the shit happens, get out there, get your friends and your family who are apathetic, talk to the people online who are apathetic, and get them out there voting. And they most likely will be more motivated next time, because the next 4 years are going to suck ass. They're going to be shitty, and nothing motivates people more as when their lives become shitty. Make sure that rage is directed properly in the next election, and we'll be able to undo some of this fucking disaster. So don't panic, folks. Don't freak out, okay? It's going to be hard. It's going to take lots of work, but we'll get through it. The country's not going to collapse. There's not going to be Nazis in the streets. That's not going to happen. They're not going to outlaw everyone who isn't a Christian or whatever. There's not going to be ICE agents fucking carting people into train cars and sending them off to concentration camps. That's not going to happen. Don't panic. Get out there, get organized, get involved, and the next time we can stop them. Anyway, folks, that's all I got. Adios.
Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.